Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on the Real Estate Podcast. I am Todd Sumney, the Chief Industry Officer for HomeSmart International, and I am so excited today to be joined by Wendy Forsyth, the Chief Operating Officer of HomeSmart International.
Thank
Wendy,
you, Todd.
Thank you for being here.
Good to be here. And for those of you watching, we're giggling because it took more than one take to get both of our names correct.
Just to get that far.
Just to get that far. So we've got some great content to share with all of you today.
We do. We do, and I love our topic that we're going to talk about today because it actually affects every one of our real estate agents. It affects their business every single day. And the topic today is going to be about honing your pitch or honing your presentations, making your presentations better. Now, recently, you were the judge at an industry event. Yes. It was called the IOI Summit. I think it's the Innovation, Opportunity, and Investment Summit. Okay.
Yes. Hosted by the National Association of Realtors. It was the first time that NAR put on this summit. It, of course, was in San Francisco because it's a technology summit. And specifically what NAR did was invited 16 tech companies to come and pitch for the opportunity to win some prize money and some other things to help their businesses and grow their businesses.
Right, and so you were a judge, and they had some strict guidelines that they had to follow. Like, what was it? 3 minutes to make their presentation, or
3 minutes. So for those of you that have ever watched Shark Tank, this was the real estate industry version of Shark Tank. So each of the company founders or representatives had 3 minutes to pitch their company to the group of judges and ultimately investors who were in the audience. There were a group of Silicon Valley investors there. And the idea was, why would you invest with me?
Right.
And it was a really great experience, but what I walked away most with is what we're going to talk about today in how that relates to our agents out in the field every day who are pitching all the time throughout the day, throughout the course of their business.
Well, and I think when you came back, we had a conversation because what brought the topic up was there were some companies that did a phenomenal job, and they managed their time well, and their presentation was right, spot on. And there were some others maybe that missed the mark on their presentation. So I want to kind of break that down a little bit because every day our agents have that opportunity. They're in front of a potential customer, a buyer, a seller, a past customer, someone in their sphere. And in order to engage the customer, move them along, they have to read the situation, understand it, but more importantly, they have to know what to say, how to say it clearly, concisely, and quickly. So what were some of the things that were the wins? Tell us about the people that did it right. What did they do?
Yeah. So, the term I use for this is micro pitching. So as agents, I think in the sales training that we all go through, we get taught that we should have an elevator pitch and we should perfect our elevator pitch. Right. But typically that elevator pitch is kind of that bigger picture, what do you do? How do you do it? And what we're doing every day is sort of smaller versions of that. And at the conference, what I saw that worked really well are the people who were pitching that had practiced. You could tell that they weren't just winging it up there. They had practice. And in fact, part of the conference was that they practiced and were coached the day before they actually delivered it live. Okay. And when I think of our real estate agents, so often we don't practice before we go into listing presentations and pricing presentations and open houses and presenting offers and all of those things that we do every day that are all micro pitches. Right. We're just kind of winging it. Right. So that was a big takeaway, is you could tell immediately, much like your buyers and sellers will be able to tell if you're not polished, you're not smooth, you're not practiced.
So first takeaway is practice. Practice makes perfect, right?
Yes. Second takeaway was timing.
Okay.
So in this contest, they had 3 minutes, and the rules were very clear. Every person doing the pitch knew coming into it that they'd had their 3 minutes. And they had their practice sessions the day before. Okay. even though they had both of those things working to their favor, some of them just lost track of themselves up there giving their pitch. And their 3 minutes was up and they got pulled off stage and they never got to the real sort of why or how of their product.
But in real life, that can happen with a customer because the customer just shuts down, they disengage, or they walk away, or they're like, "Hey, I got to run," and you missed your opportunity. And I think that's where the term elevator pitch came from, because the concept was somebody gets on the floor, first floor, and they punch floor number 8, and you only have that amount of time to really engage them. So point number 2. Keeping track of your time.
Yes,
and
very
using your time
important.
effectively.
Very important. And I think especially with today's consumer. I mean, we are an on-demand culture, right? We communicate via text message, we tweet in 140 characters or less. If somebody's taking a long time to explain something and not getting to the point, you lose your audience.
Right.
So if you're an agent, that's something to really think about when you're doing your micro pitches, is am I getting to the point? Which really goes into the third takeaway, which is you have to have a point, and by that I mean there should be a closing question. It should be very clear what you're asking for or what the next step is after the pitch. And I always think of our agents with this is, it's like you've got to ask for the listing appointment. You've got to ask for the listing once you get on the appointment. You've got to ask for the offer when you're showing the properties. You've got to ask for their name when they show up at the open house. You've got to ask if you can follow up. So often we're not doing those things, and those are huge opportunities missed.
Right. Well, and I think that's where that engagement term to me is so important, because you're taking that level of engagement to the next level to actually be in action, to actually ask for what you want. And I remembered you telling me that there were people who it wasn't clear what they wanted or what they were asking for.
Or even what they were selling or what the benefit was. So, it was very interesting to see that.
Okay, so how about answering questions? Like at that point, the presentation's over, then you get to the fielding and answering questions. I mean, sometimes I've heard people before they get asked a question and they never answer the question.
Yes.
So, I mean, that also is part of your preparation and practicing questions ahead of time, right? Knowing what the questions are going to be asked and what the right answers are.
Yeah, it's sort of anticipating those questions. So you could tell the people that didn't put any time into thinking about what are the questions I'm likely to get asked, because they would often ramble or they just never answered. So the judge would have to come back and say, well, but you didn't really answer that. And again, bringing that back to what we all do every day, it's important to answer things clearly, concisely, quickly, check for acceptance, and then move on. Right.
Well, and then I think that a common thing that happens when you just said a key point or a key phrase, you're like that they didn't think it through. So I think then that the underlying tone of a presentation is if it's obvious you haven't thought things through, then how prepared are you? How much have you thought through, the problem that you're trying to help the customer with, right? So it translates to directly to your professionalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so their trust in you.
I think trust is an important part of that, because if that isn't shining through, am I going to trust you to invest money in your business, or am I going to trust you to list my house and represent me in the sale of my property? Am I going to trust you to negotiate the purchase of a property that I'm buying? So there's a lot of underlying things there that I think it's really important for all of us to think about and to always be working on improving.
Now, okay, so you mentioned this earlier here. So you talked about, micro pitches. So all day long, we in real estate, we actually have, it's not just one pitch, right? It's multiple pitches on various topics. You mentioned earlier, like the offer. That was an aha in my past discussion with you about this. Yeah, you need to really have that offer thought through before you make the phone call or before you make the offer presentation. What are some takeaways about micro pitches specifically related to real estate?
Yeah, it's all of those moments. So it is that first introduction at an open house. That's a micro pitch, what you say, how you introduce yourself, how you invite those people in to look at the home. That's a micro pitch. When you're setting up a listing appointment, that's a micro pitch. When you show up at the listing appointment, you got a whole series of micro pitches at the different stages.
Right.
So it might be talking about, what I do to market a home, what I do to merchandise a property when somebody lists it with me, right down to presenting the CMA,
right.
and what the suggestion is for market value. Moving along kind of the life cycle, working with buyers,
right.
Qualifying buyers. That's a micro pitch on, why they should get pre-qualified now, what that experience is going to be like when they start working to find a home and start working with a loan officer or a lender at that point. Writing that first offer when they find a home that they want. Like all of those things that we
right.
do can be broken down into a series of micro pitches.
Right.
And, agents that I talk to about this, they're not thinking granularly enough about those activities. They think of the big picture, but not all the micro. So we often use the language of macro and micro. So they got macro, I want to list a house and sell it. I want to find a buyer and help them buy a house. But they're not thinking of the hundreds and hundreds of micro moments that go into that macro outcome.
Well, even one of the points that you had was working your database. And when you think about your database, you have customers that are in various different buckets. Each one of those buckets requires a different micro pitch, so to speak, because you're going to talk to a past customer differently than somebody who you've never known before, but they're a lead off of your website, right? Or and so when you break down your database, you need to have different ones. So,
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to throw you a little curveball here a little
Okay.
bit. So recently at the National Association of Realtors, you did a presentation. And you even flashed some photographs of way back when in real estate. So I have some of those photos. I'm kidding. I don't have them.
That's funny.
But I heard,
That's funny, Todd.
But my point is that you have years of real estate experience, and you used to sell. You used to work the business. So the question is: so did you write out 20 different scenarios and practice them? How did you develop your micro pitches?
Yeah.
Or how do you coach agents to develop their micro pitches? I think we've made a case for why they need to do it.
There was a lot in that setup, Todd.
I know.
So I did recently give a presentation where I did share some of my first real estate photos. So that classic, like my first headshot.
Right.
So, all of us that have started in the business probably have that in the vault somewhere. It was not flattering, but got the point across. Back when I started selling real estate, I was a nerd. I'm still a nerd today. But yes, I did learn all the dialogue, and I studied the scripts and I practiced the scripts. And for me at that time when I first started selling, expireds were very big. And here we are 2018 going into 2019, expireds are making a comeback. So if you haven't been working expireds in a while, you might want to brush up your skills on those. But yeah, I did. I had the script in front of me, and the beauty of the telephone is you can write it down and put it in front of you, and the person on the other end doesn't know. Right. And that is a technique that I've used all throughout my career, and especially with coaching agents and coaching leadership, is whenever there's a difficult call or something that you're uncomfortable with, write it down. If it's a phone call, then you've got that script to follow. If it is just practice to go into a presentation that's going to be delivered face-to-face, it helps you practice what you want to say and navigate through that. So it's definitely a strategy that works, and I highly recommend to people.
That's great. Well, I think you've had some beautiful golden nuggets here for everyone. The first one, really is about, manage your time, right?
Yeah.
Actually, the first one was practice. It was practice.
Yeah.
Second one was manage your time.
Yeah, get to the point.
Exactly.
Know what you're trying to accomplish.
Yep, and then know your micro pitches and write them down and practice them. And
go for the close, what you're asking for, and then practice and be prepared. And I hope that all of you that are watched, just think about what are those moments throughout your day that are really micro pitches that you can perfect and you can improve. That's how we move the needle, is just by making small incremental improvements. and then you see big changes and big outcomes as a result of that. So that is our hope for all of you that took the time to watch.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, Wendy, for being here today and for sharing that with everyone. So this has been the Real Estate Podcast. I'm Todd Sumney again from HomeSmart, and this is Wendy Forsythe. Thank you, Wendy, for being here. I hope you all take these tidbits and tips and put them to work in your business and really apply them, and keep coming back to the podcast and look for some future podcasts and topics that we have. And Wendy, we're going to invite you back. You have some good things to share, so
awesome.
be on the lookout
Anytime.
for Wendy on some future podcasts. So thank you all for joining us today, and go be successful in your business. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I'd like to take a moment and say thank you to all of you viewers and listeners out there of the Real Estate Podcast. I'm Todd Sumney, the Chief Industry Officer for HomeSmart International.
And I'm Wendy Forsythe, the Chief Operating Officer for HomeSmart International. And we'd like to invite you to subscribe to the Real Estate Podcast, give us a like, and also give us a review so that more people will know that our podcast is available out there to listen to.
Yes, and keep coming back on a regular basis, because we have a whole host of topics all designed to help you tap into the strategies that can really help you grow your real estate business.
So hit that subscribe button. Thank you, everyone.